Aerial in conjunction with Flying Labs. And who is Precision Aerial? Precision Aerial is a commercial drone company. It's a commercial drone service company that provides drone integration services across several industrial industries, including agriculture, construction, conservation, energy, telecoms, and so on and so forth. And Precision Aerial was founded in Zimbabwe and has expanded operations to South Africa. It's one of the few companies that has licensed pilots in Zimbabwe. Okay, and so we like I mentioned that we're working in conjunction with Flying Labs, and the Flying Labs is a network of local technology and innovation hubs that leverage drones and robotics for social and humanitarian impact. So Flying Labs has a global footprint with hubs in over 35 countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. And each Flying Labs is co-created with already existing local experts to make the connection between local problems and potential solutions offered by appropriate robotics technologies. And this accelerates the positive impact of the use of technology in humanitarian, health, development, and environmental solutions locally. And so Flying Labs are directly connected to each other, which builds the strength of the network, sharing lessons learned and best practices across the globe, training each other, and working on joint projects. And so Flying Labs communicate and leverage from each other's experiences, which ensures a high success rate on projects that are implemented by the local chapter of the Flying Labs. So the Flying Labs sector, it's based, the Flying Labs sector-based program tracks and services to contribute to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so through these services, Flying Labs provide local solutions, drones as a service, coordination and customized training to NGOs, government agencies, universities and institutions regarding drone technology. So these focus on sustainable development, humanitarian aid, public health, including good health and well-being. So our program tracks allows us to address the specific needs of each sector and build learning and sharing platforms to accelerate these actions. So that's who Flying Labs is, and that's who Precision Aerial is. And these are the people who are going to be bringing you these sessions every month, starting with this one. So before we jump into what we're going to do today, I would like to share some house rules for the meeting. And so the first one is we need to keep our mics on mute when you're not speaking, okay? Make sure that your mic is on mute at all times unless you need to speak. And then if you have any questions throughout this session, please put the questions in the comment section, in the chat section rather. Then we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So please do not interrupt when the presentation is happening. There will be a whole session for that towards the end of the meeting. So maybe some of you are wondering, so what's the point of the knowledge series, right? So whether you are a drone enthusiast, a drone owner, a drone pilot, or a drone professional, the goal is to equip you with information and skills that will help you operate your drone or future drone. If you haven't purchased any drone yet, if you've never operated a drone, we want to equip you with skills and information that will help you to operate your drone confidently, ethically, legally, and safely in our context. So we'll host these monthly meetings with different topics, and they will be hosted by Precision Aerial and Flying Labs. And so why is it important for us to get trained in the drone space? Obviously, drones operate in airspace. And when we talk about airspace, this is space that is occupied also by other aircraft, both large aircraft, small aircraft, different sizes of aircraft. And so every time when we mention airspace, or when airspace is involved, there's always safety issues that consequently follow. So it's important for whoever is operating a drone to be at least trained for their own safety and for the safety of others. So how can you stay connected with us? We are available on all social media. We're available on Twitter, we're available on Instagram, and we're available on Facebook, and we're also there on LinkedIn. On Facebook, it's Precision Aerial and Zimbabwe Flying Labs, and then on Twitter we are at Precision UAV and at Zim Flying Labs, and then on Instagram it's Precision Aerial and at Zimbabwe Flying Labs. And also, if you prefer to drop us an email, you can email us on zimbabwe@flyinglabs.org. I'll repeat that again, zimbabwe@flyinglabs.org. And please, if you would like us to continue communicating between this first session and the next one, you can either drop your email if you're comfortable to drop it on the chat, or you can email us on Zimbabwe Flying Labs, so that we have your email and we can give you information about future updates and events and so forth. And we also have other resources that can empower you. Apart from these sessions, we have Precision Aerial has multiple professional training programs which you can get involved in, and these are specialized training programs for different industries. And so we also have 2 books that have been published. You can get those on Amazon. It's called, the books are called Drone Professional. So it's a series of books. So far there's 2. There's Drone Professional 1 and there's Drone Professional 2. And if you want to get a hold of those books, please do email us. They are very useful resources. I have read Drone Professional 1 and it's quite a useful resource. So I would encourage you to get those books for your personal development, okay? So before I move on, I would like to thank you once again for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your effort, and I see there's a lot of participants from different walks of life, and there's 29 of us, which is a very good attendance. So once again, thank you so much for participating. And we are going to move on to we're going to move on now to to introduce our speakers for the day, who are going to be taking these sessions and giving us very excellent and awesome information on drones, and particularly the subject or the topic of drone training. So our first speaker is going to be Tawanda Chihambakwe, and he's the founder of Precision Aerial Group. He's also the managing director of Zimbabwe Flying Labs, which I mentioned earlier on. And he's a certified drone professional and licensed drone pilot with multi-rotor and fixed wing ratings. He is also a committee member of South Africa Drone Council and South Africa Drone Pilot Network. He's also an international speaker on drone technology, STEM education, and fourth industrial revolution, including 20 speaking events. He's been involved with webinars, conferences, and he's conducted these in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, the United States, and of course, Zimbabwe. Tawanda is also an international best-selling author who has co-authored 2 Amazon best-selling books on drone profession, with the latest being published in February, and has been #1 bestseller in Germany, UK, and USA in the aviation category. And I know today is his birthday, so happy birthday, Tawanda. Hope may you grow in your career, and we wish you good things. So if you would like, please wish him a happy birthday in the chat section, and if you have his contact, you can just throw him a happy birthday message over there. And then we've got our second speaker from South Africa. Her name is Itumeleng Mokoena, and she's a licensed drone pilot with over 200 flight hours with the commercial drone, within the commercial drone industry. She is also a licensed instructor on both multi-rotor and fixed-wing drones. She is also a certified drone maintenance technician, and she's the flight operations manager at Pathias Air, and she's also a co-author of best-selling book in the aviation category. So yeah, I guarantee you that today we are in very capable hands, as you can see these profiles. So yeah, before we without wasting much of your time, I'll introduce Tawanda to take us on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Caspar, for that elaborate introduction. It's a privilege and an honor for me to be able to connect with you. I'm just wanting to share my screen. Let me know when you can see my screen. Is it clear?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm not going to take too much of your time today. Just first of all, thank you all for joining us. We hope to have these sessions be more interactive. We don't want to make them one way where we're just, talking and, chatting. We'd definitely like to have you guys give input just in these conversations. And really, we're doing this to help and support and grow the local ecosystem in Zimbabwe. And really the idea of actually setting up the knowledge series came from just us being inundated with requests from different people, who are asking us about how do they get trained? How do they get a, drone pilot license? And, what are the regulations in Zimbabwe and that kind of thing. So, we decided to put this together, and we've invited, Itumeleng, who has been instrumental in just even the growth and development of the drone industry in South Africa, and has helped many people to actually get their licenses. So you'll be probably hearing more from her than from me today. But really what I want to do is just give an overview of the Zimbabwean context, just so that we are all on the same page. So for today, really the question, that I would first ask is, why are you here? I think there's, like what Caspar said, he mentioned that there's, 31 participants here with us today, and each of you are here for a different reason, and hopefully today we'll be able to answer some of those questions that you guys will have. So I want you to keep that question in mind. Why are you here? What is it that you wanted to learn? And let's see if we can answer some of that. Okay, so why is drone training important? And really all I'm just going to touch on is, just a brief about where we are at as a country in terms of the use of drone technology, and why drone training is important. So for those of you who are on the call who may not be aware of this, who may not know that drones themselves are aircraft. Okay, a drone is classified as an aircraft. For the most part, the use of drones in Zimbabwe has been limited to your smaller consumer grade drones, which are then used for different, various purposes to take photos and videos, for different various things. Whereas the use case applications of drones across a variety of different sectors is growing in Zimbabwe and across the continent and in the world. So the understanding of how drones are actually regulated is from a perspective of aviation and not from a perspective of it being a toy or a flying camera. Okay. So to understand that is an important part of why we're even doing these trainings, is so that we have, we help people get the right perception as well as the right perspective around the use of drones. Now for our session today, just so that we know in terms of the base, when we look at drone training, really the training is looking at different aspects that help to build confidence. And ideally it's to help build confidence in a new owner or a user of drones. First and foremost, okay, we want, drone owners and drone users to be confident when they're flying and operating their drones. We also want to ensure that the actual flights and flight operations are being done in an ethical manner. Okay, that flights are being done in designated areas under the designated conditions around what is governed by or set out by the local civil aviation. And here we have the civil aviation of Zimbabwe. Then there's also the issue of the legality of it. There is a statutory instrument and there are regulations in place for that guide the use of drones in Zimbabwe. So any other operations outside of that are deemed to be illegal flights. So the purpose of training is also to bring information around that and to conscientize any drone owner or anyone who wants to operate drones, be it for as a hire or whether you own it. You need to know and understand your responsibility when it comes to operating drones. Then there's the last aspect, which is probably one of the most important ones, which is the safety aspect. Okay, safety is very important. And here we highlight some of the things and the reasons why is because drones share airspace, right? Just like you have rules of the road when you drive around in your car, there are rules of the air. So training is important so that you understand the rules of the air, right? Too often we have situations where people just get a drone and they buy it and they go on Google, YouTube, watch a couple of videos and they're up in the air. And now all of a sudden they are calling themselves and declaring themselves as drone pilots, which is further from the truth. So training is important so that whoever's operating a drone is operating it according to the rules of the air, okay? Now, when you're operating drones are operating in the air, and in the air, there are other manned aircraft, okay? And manned aircraft have people inside. So if we have an incident where we have a drone having an incident with the manned aircraft, which is your larger planes, the likelihood and the risk is really on the people in those planes. So you're putting people's lives at risk if you're operating without having some sort of training or understanding of the rules of the air. Okay, so these are some of the things that we're trying to also make sure that are clear and that we set the ground rules for why training is important. Okay, all right. And one of the things we always say, even in one of in our training programs, when we're delivering them, is drones have the potential to do good or do harm depending on whose hands the drone is in. And really that comes down to whether it's a person who's trained or untrained. That's really how we determine whether the drone can do harm or do good. Is the person trained or is the person not trained? Right. So now let's go in and look at where is this all coming from, okay? So one of the things that we wanting to make sure is even through this, we are also sharing information. And this is information that you would receive, some of the information you would receive when you actually go and enroll in a training program. But we are breaking it down and sharing as much information as we can without actually delivering the whole program through these sessions. So this is just an outline of how the regulations themselves are developed from a global perspective, okay? You will look, and if you're aware of the drone regulations in Zimbabwe, It's not to say that a group of Zimbabweans sat down and decided this is a good idea and this is what should be in the regulations. There are standards that are set out at an international level that we then draw from in terms of our regulations and the standards we use here. Okay, so here we have what's called the ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, and it is part and parcel of the UN. And this was formed after the Second World War, really to try and govern, how aviation or aviation management standards and safety practices are delivered across different countries. So ICAO, the ICAO standards are actually used in most countries in the world, save for America, which has a different standard, which is the FAA. And they go according to those standards, but they're not that much different to ICAO. So most of the countries you can think of across Africa, in Europe, Australia, they subscribe to ICAO standards. ICAO then puts out standards. Those standards are then what becomes acts of parliament, which is what then gives us the statutory instruments that we have. For example, the statutory instrument that we have regulating drones is really come from the guidelines set up by ICAO. Then we take our information from there, come up with our own set of rules. Then we have civil aviation regulations, which are the actual regulations themselves. And then we have civil aviation technical standards, which is the rollout of how the regulations should be implemented. Okay, in Zimbabwe, we have regulations in place. Okay, and the regulations that are there in place, and this is the guiding law, which is Statutory Instrument 271 of 2018. And anyone, whether you're on this call or you have friends or you know anyone who has a drone, or if you're thinking of getting a drone, right? The responsibility of everyone who is an owner of a drone is to know and understand these regulations. That is your personal duty and responsibility. So if you have one and you don't know the regulations, please do get them. You can also maybe send us an email and we can share those with you. And if you are thinking of getting a drone, it would be good to also maybe take a look at these first before you actually get a drone. So this is what guides us. And the responsible ministry, also the regulator is the Civil Aviation Authority of Zimbabwe. They're the regulator. Okay, they don't make up the rules per se. Okay, they manage the regulations. They're contributors in terms of developing the regulations, but they draw from, like I said, ICAO. But in terms of how, if we wanted to make any adjustments to the regulations, that would then have to go back to Parliament. Then the responsible ministry is the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure Development. So they're the overarching ministry that govern the use of drones and aviation in Zimbabwe. So this is an important point to know and remember. And that's really where standards come from. Now, I'm just going to touch quickly on the different types of training, and then I'll allow Itumeleng to speak more in detail about the training that everyone's asking about is how do I get my drone pilot license? Everyone is just, that's the question that really I think everyone wants answered today. So now in terms of where we're at in Zimbabwe, the types of training that are available officially right now, when you look there, you'll see there's 4 different types that we've highlighted. There are probably even more that we haven't put there. The first one is the RPL, right, which is called the Remote Pilot License, or RPAS stands for Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems License, okay? And this training is governed by the regulator, which is Civil Aviation. And what they do is that they will set out and give license to an organization, a training organization, and approve them to provide the training required for licensing, okay? In Zimbabwe currently right now, we do not have any approved training organizations. So there is no method and means to get your license locally in Zimbabwe. Currently, the Civil Aviation is busy at work putting in place the structures needed to allow that to happen and for us to have an approved training organization. But as it stands today, there isn't. But I'm sure that will change, or indications show that will change within the next 12 months or less than that, hopefully. But under the RPL and RPAS license training, you can get multi-rotor and fixed wing training. And this is really speaking to the different types of commercial drones. You have multi-rotor and you have fixed wing drones. Multi-rotor being the more common one that we know of and that we see most times that most people have. Fixed wing being the larger aircraft that carry larger sensors, larger payloads, which you then need a special training for, okay? Then there are other additional ratings. So the second one is additional ratings, which is the BVLOS, which means beyond visual line of sight. And this speaks of really training around being able to use drones beyond the visual limit that an operator would have. Then you have instructor rating. So anyone who's delivering training or training for licensing or to license other pilots must have an instructor's rating. So Itumeleng is joining us today, and she is an instructor who is rated on both fixed wing as well as multi-rotor. Then you have an examiner's license. So the examiner would also need to have their license to actually examine the work that's been done in terms of training. Then we have what we call sector-specific training. What you'll find when you go through the process is the RPL and RPAS license is the starting block. It's not the end all. So a lot of people think that when you have your RPL or your RPAS license, it means then you know how to fly every different type of drone, and you know how to use drones in all the different types of contexts, whether it's agriculture or healthcare, disaster management, and that's not the case, right? The RPAS and RPL license is really the starting block, and that really teaches you the rules of the air and teaches you all the different things that you know about in an aviation context. Once you have that license, you then need to go and get further training, which is specific to the sector in which you want to apply the technology. So if you want to apply technology in agriculture, for example, you must then take an additional course around aerial mapping and data processing or crop spraying. The same with if you want to do land surveying, the same if you want to use it for construction or mining or telecoms or whatever kind of use case. You then need to go and get additional training that is specific. Otherwise, you are then left at a place where you are, the same as someone who doesn't, in terms of your knowledge base of how the technology is used in a specific use case. Your understanding would be good in terms of using the drone, but for the actual application of the technology in that space, you would need further training. Then we have what we call advanced and specialized training. And this one is most times is aircraft specific. So there are specific drones that are being manufactured now where even if you have your RPL license, your multi-rotor, your fixed wing, you then need to get specific training for that specific aircraft. And we're talking your larger aircraft and your more sophisticated kind of drones. And it's interesting to actually note that we've actually found just through our research is that there are people even here in Zimbabwe who have these highly specialized aircraft without the requisite training. And they're really operating and that kind of thing, which then brings in all sorts of different risks and issues and that kind of thing. So really that's what we wanted to talk about and just share and say, okay, these are the parameters around the different types of training. Now, what I want to do just in terms of ending off here is touch briefly on some of the things that Casper mentioned, is that what we've done in the absence of not having the RPL license training, we have come in and developed the third level training, which is the sector specific training. We have started developing those programs, taking off the information that we've developed from our own experience, from our own licensing, and from the connections we've made just in the global drone industry, as well as leveraging off expertise from people like Itumeleng and others. So we've developed now sector specific trainings for certain industries. Some of them are like drones for agriculture. These are some of our courses. So we have quite a number of different courses. This is just one category in which we have different courses in the agricultural space. And I think towards the end, we'll share which other courses we have for the other industries. And this is really to give an understanding of how to apply the technology in a given use case. We know that people are already using drones. It's a given. And once the civil aviation has in place, the required structures to allow for training, then a call, I'm sure, will be made, or the public awareness will become more apparent around the need to get training. So we are kind of going a step ahead and preparing for that. And then now helping those who are already in the use to say, okay, let's at least get you to a place of understanding, knowing how to use it, knowing at least a bit about the regulations, even whilst we wait for the licensing process to be made available in the local context. So I'm going to end there and then allow Itumeleng to join us and speak specifically around the training for licensing. What does it involve? What are the subjects that you can expect to learn in that space? How long does it take? and I think she can answer specifically on that as an instructor. So I'll hand over now to Casper Tumeling.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for the invitation, Tawanda, and happy birthday. Without wasting any further time, I would also like to share a brief presentation that I actually created. Okay, can you please confirm if you're able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, so as Tawanda has already alluded to, if you are going to be operating drones for commercial bases, then you need to go through the relevant training to ensure that you are certified and approved by the Civil Aviation Authority to ensure that you can carry out those training. And where you can actually obtain those training is at approved training organizations, that where they are called. So the training schools are approved training organizations. And what that means is that they have been approved by the Civil Aviation Authority to ensure that they can carry out training and that their standards actually meet the standards of civil aviation training. Because what you will find is that you'll come across organizations where they say they offer you drone training, for example, but then it's not certified. So with approved training organizations, you go through the process, and I'll explain the process as I go along with this presentation, and you are able to be certain that you are not receiving training that isn't valid or is like a fly-by-night type of thing. With the approved training organization, you know that your license will essentially be recognized by the specific Civil Aviation Authority. In terms of the criteria for training, you need to be 18 years and older. And the reason why they generally say you have to be 18 years is because once you go into the commercial training aspect of it, you need to be held accountable. So as Tawanda alluded to, is to say that, you know, drones can be used for good or bad depending on who's holding it. So one of the things as you go into operations, you'll find that you'll find out that you need to have liability insurance. And let's say, for example, anything goes wrong with your drone operation, or you crash into somebody, then there'll need to be an investigation and you will need to be held accountable for whatever actions that took place. Then you also need to hold a valid Class 3 medical certificate. So in aviation, there are different types of class medicals that you get. I think it's a Class 1, 2, 3, as well as 4. Previously, they used to say you need a Class 4, and then the regulation changed along the way somewhere. So the minimum now that you need is a Class 3 medical, and you also get this done at an approved aviation medical doctor. So you can't just go to your general practitioner and say that you have a clearance medical certificate. It also needs to be done by an approved medical doctor that has been cleared by the Civil Aviation Authority. You also need to hold an English language proficiency certificate. So generally with that, they would request maybe a degree or a postdoctorate or some form of advanced training, if I can put it that way. If you do not have any of those, then there are also training institutions that you can go to, and then you can basically do a language proficiency test with a designated examiner, and then they will issue you with that English language proficiency certificate. And the reason why you also need to do that is because in aviation, the general language of communication is English, so that you are able to communicate with other people as well if you're maybe flying in controlled airspace, for example. And by controlled airspace, I mean other regulated airspace where you will find that there's an air traffic control that you need to report to for your operations, for example. So the reason why you need to have the English language proficiency is to ensure that you are able to communicate with other airspace users. Okay, so now to go into the actual course content of what drone training actually covers. Generally the course is split into two. So you'll have the theoretical part of the course, and then you'll also have the practical part of the course. So with the theoretical part, depending on the training organization that you'll go to, you'll be required to attend classes for, let's say, 5 or 6 days in class, and then they'll take you through the training. If you have some form of previous aviation experience or licensing, such as your private pilot license or commercial pilot license, airline transport pilot license, then you can apply for exemption for some of the courses. And then you will, instead of doing like a 5-day course, for example, you'll be able to do a 2 or 3 day course. And once you've completed the practical part of it, you'll also be required to write examinations. Now with those examinations as well, they're basically valid for a period of 3 months before they lapse. And once your exams lapse, essentially, then it means you will have to go and retest. But generally you are able to obtain your drone pilot license within that 3 months. So it shouldn't be an issue. Then you'll also have to do some form of actual practical training on the drone itself. So once you've done all your theory classes and you've completed all your exams, you'll also do practical flight lessons. And in there, that's when they'll then teach you the basics about how to fly a drone. Then with that part of the training, you will do basic exercises like how to fly a square, a box, a circle, basic maneuvers to basically teach you how to remain in control of your drone. And then you will, once you have completed all the exercises, so there are different exercises, again, depending on the type of school you go to, they may vary in number, but generally I think you'll find about 13 exercises that you need to be completed. And then from there, once you have passed all the exams and once you have been basically signed out on all the practical part of the training, you will then do a mock evaluation test, which is basically some sort of recommendation. So how the training also works is you won't go directly to an examiner, but before you go to an examiner, you need to fly with someone else who was not your instructor, who could be the chief flight instructor, for example. So the chief flight instructor will need to fly with you and basically sign you out to say that this person is competent enough and they should be able to pass the examination with the examiner. So they try and basically do like checks and balances to say, if I've been your instructor from the theory part to the practical and I've done all the practical training, then I generally wouldn't be the person who signs you out. So I wouldn't be the person who does your recommendation. Someone else who's basically the chief flight instructor will come and then do a recommendation test with you. And once they've established that you are now competent enough to go through to the examination part, then you will go and do a skills test with a designated RPAS examiner. And once you basically complete that, the skills test with the examiner, then you will be in possession of your RPL. So in terms of the theory training of it that I mentioned earlier as well, these are the basic subjects that you will go through within your course. So you'll cover meteorology, which basically deals with your clouds and your sky and how to manage weather, thunderstorms, which type of weather that you should look out for, those type of things. Then you cover your navigation, which also has to do with your aeronautical maps, with your flight training, with your flight preparation. Then you cover human performance as well, which has to do with you as the actual pilot. There are factors that affect you as a pilot. How do you maintain safety as a pilot? What are some of the things that you should look out for as a pilot? You look at construction of flight, which there are different, it's divided into two sections. So with the RPL training, what I neglected to mention earlier is you can do the multi-rotor training, which is like your basic quadcopter training, and you can also do your fixed wing training. So if you are doing both, then you'll do like a construction of flight, which goes into how the aircraft flies and all of those things for multi-rotor. And then if you're also doing the fixed wing side of it, you will also do a construction of flight for airplane. From there, you'll also go into batteries, how your batteries actually work, how to take care of them, and ensure that they last longer. Also radio links, which goes into how the actual drone works, your airlaw, which is probably the most important part, which deals with the law and the regulations, Civil Aviation Authority. So why is it that we actually need to go through I was going to say regularized, but I don't think that's a word. Why you actually need to go through training that has been approved by Civil Aviation Authority. Then you also go into flight planning, which again deals with how you actually go about planning for your flights. What is it that you need to look out for? Depending on which country you actually do the training, you may also need to do restricted radio telephony. Mainly because, for example, here in South Africa, if you're going to be operating in controlled airspace, then you need to have the restricted radio telephony. And it's not just for in controlled airspace as well, but even uncontrolled airspace. So the main reason why you need to do the restricted radio telephony is if you are flying in congested areas or in an area where there's other manned aviation traffic, then you are able to communicate with the guys who are in the airplane and ensure that you basically are able to ensure separation and avoidance to mitigate any event that might cause an accident or something like that. Okay, I think that was basically it on the general training with your RPL. And then like Tawanda alluded, there's also your industry specific training or your sector specific training. Now this part is very important because with the RPL training, they don't teach you how to fly for aerial photography or videography or survey and mapping in agriculture. What they basically teach you to do is how do you actually fly your drone, not how do you actually apply your drone flying skills for a specific sector. So there's quite a big market for industry specific training, because what you will get is more often than not, guys just go, they do the training, but then they want to actually work commercially as drone operators, but they don't have the actual skill set to carry out the industry specific training. So for example, let's say you wanted to get into your mining and do survey and mapping, for example. How then do you go about setting up your GSDs? How then do you go about knowing which height to fly at what time do you fly to ensure that you mitigate your shadows so that it doesn't compromise the integrity of your data and all of those? If you're doing security, for example, as well, how do you actually go about flying the drone to ensure that you're also able, because with security, it's a very complex operation where it's not just about flying the drone, but also how do you integrate with the ground security team, for the example, if that's the type of operation you are doing. So with the industry specific training, it's very important to ensure that you know what industry you want to specialize in, and how do you go about actually obtaining for that specific industry. And that's where I will leave it for now.
All right. Thank you so much, Tawanda. Thank you so much, Itumeleng. And those were very informative. That was very informative. That's what I thought, at least for myself. I really enjoyed the presentation. So now that we understand and we've heard why training is important and the nitty-gritties of training, what we get trained for, I would like to believe that we have a number of questions. Yes, we have 2 questions so far. So we are going to open it to our participants. If you have more questions that you didn't manage to ask, you can raise your hand, and then we can attend to your question. But we're going to start with the 2 questions that were asked on the chat or on the comment section. So first question was Tafadzwa from Tafadzwa Bere, and he says, so basically if you have OPL, it doesn't automatically mean you can fly any platform. I'm not sure if that is a question or a comment, but maybe Tawanda, you could allude to this concept of you having the OPL and versus you having a specific license. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I can come in there. So to answer your question, Tafadzwa, the training that we are talking about for the RPL, I think that was a typo there, but it's RPL, Remote Pilot License. That training, you have the option of choosing between multi-rotor and fixed wing. So that is the multi-rotor and fixed wing are basically 2 categories of drones. It's not necessarily 2 types of drones, but it's 2 different categories. So under multi-rotor, you'll get so many different types of drones. So there are many different types of multi-rotor drones. So the training is to give you an understanding of the basics around how to use a multi-rotor drone, not a specific type of multi-rotor drone. So where you find, like I was saying, is on some platforms, on some drone platforms, you may need to actually get specific training on that platform, even though you hold the license for multi-rotor. The same with fixed wing. There are different types of fixed wing drones, and some are highly specialized, and you would then need to get training specifically on that drone. So this is the training just gives you a general overview of how to operate a drone in general.
Great. I hope Tafadzwa has been answered. And then to the next question, we have McHenry, who said, do you need to do English language proficiency certificate if you are a holder of a diploma? I will direct this one to Itumeleng.
Thanks, Casper. No, you do not need to do the English language proficiency if you have a diploma. Generally, they do consider that as valid enough or proof enough that you can speak English. But again, I think it also depends on which university or which institution you actually obtained the diploma from. So if the institution, for example, is not a English home language institution, for example, then you'll need to do the English language proficiency. But if it's an institution that uses English to communicate, then you won't need to do the English language proficiency.
Great. So if you have a diploma, generally you don't need to do the proficiency. You don't need the proficiency certificate. And on to the third question, which says, are there any certified medical practitioners in Zimbabwe for the medical certificate? Tawanda, please, if you could answer this one.
Yes, we do have certified aviation medical examiners. I think there's 2 of them. And we can send you information and details to those guys if you just give us your email address. Yeah.
Great. So please do contact us and we will give you the contact for the medical practitioners in the Zimbabwean context. And then our next question is, what's the best way to obtain an RPL to use in Zimbabwe currently if the framework is still being developed? And again, I will direct this one to Tawanda, who is in the Zimbabwean context.
So what I had to do for me to get my RPAS license is I had to actually go to South Africa to get trained. So what you can do is, you can also look at other countries. There are other countries like Zambia that also have approved training schools. You just need to make sure that whichever school you're going to go to, please check with the local civil aviation authority in Zimbabwe to make sure that the license that you're going to obtain from them or the training that you'll obtain from that school will be recognized here.
All right. So what Tawanda just basically said is, if you need to, you basically at the moment, essentially you can't get your license in Zimbabwe, but you can get it in countries like South Africa. I know Malawi is one of them, but you first have to engage with the Civil Aviation Authority so that you don't spend your money, your hard-earned money, on a certificate that may be invalid in Zimbabwe. So engage the Civil Aviation Authority in Zimbabwe. And then our next question is, how has the industry grown in terms of the drone production or other industries like drone programming, and how might one approach it as a beginner?
Okay, great question. Thank you for that question. It's a very important one. So part of our role and the reason why we have Flying Labs now in Zimbabwe is to develop an ecosystem that allows us to do exactly what you've shared about in terms of actually helping to grow the industry. There are a lot of drones in Zimbabwe, I think, safely say in the thousands, but the use of the drones is really not being governed in a way that is, trained and professional, etc. Right. So when it comes to that, when we don't have the structure required to have a proper industry, then things like manufacturing aren't as advanced, because we don't know, things like the demand that's there, because people are using drones privately and not really sharing to say this is what we're doing, because they're obviously doing it illegally. So part of our work is to actually build up capacity locally as the Flying Labs. So we are also looking at how do we support young startups and people who want to actually manufacture drones. So we will then leverage our global network, our experience, our connections to try and help to develop whatever model whoever wants to, come up with, if you have a drone that you want to build, but help you also have context. So I can tell you right now, for example, agriculture is a big space, especially in Zimbabwe, where there are opportunities that if someone wants to develop a drone, I would direct them directly to, to agriculture, versus just trying to create a drone for the sake of, creating one. The drone has to serve and meet a purpose and meet a need that is currently existing in the local context. And so if you're a beginner and you're talking about programming, that's part and parcel of it, is some of the programs that we are developing. We have youth training programs that we're actually in the process of rolling out soon, where we'll actually be, doing programming for drones specifically, as well as, creating a space where people who want to start up and get into the space can actually become part and parcel of it. And yeah, I guess we'll keep you informed about that.
Yeah, sorry, I think my mic was on mute. So our next question is, how much does it cost to obtain an RPL? And I'll direct this one to Itumeleng, since she's in South Africa, where there's actually where you actually obtain the license.
Thanks, Casper. So in terms of looking at the cost for the drone training or the RPL training, you are looking at about 25 to 30,000 for your multi-rotor training specifically. So this means for just your normal rotor type of drone that you're looking at. If you want to go and add your additional fixed wing rating to that, then you're looking to add another 10 plus 15K. So if you're looking at both the multi-rotor training and the fixed wing training together, you're looking at about 40,000 rands. It could be more, plus or minus, depending also on the schools, because with the schools as well, they charge different rates. But generally for your basic multi-rotor training, which is your basic RPL without the fixed wing, you're looking at about 25 to 30,000. And if you are adding the airplane on top of that, it's about maybe 40 to 45K at most.
Yeah.
All right.
So for, if I can jump in, so for the Zimbabwean context, so you understand, the range is about $2,000 for your the multi-rotor. And then on the top end, if you want to add fixed wing, then you're looking at between $2,000 and $3,000.
Great. Thank you so much for that information. So to the participants, you better start saving up so that we can have trained and licensed pilots in Zimbabwe. We need a lot of those. And our next question is, can you tell us a bit about registering your drone in Zimbabwe? Sorry, Itumeleng, a lot of the questions are directed at the Zimbabwean context, so I will throw them to Tawanda. Yeah.
Okay, great. In terms of registering your drone, yes, we'll probably actually do a different topic session on drone registration. But what you can do, so that I don't have to get into too much detail, is send us an email just with a request about drone registration, and then we can send that to you directly. But just for the sake of everyone on the call, all drones in Zimbabwe are meant to be registered, whether it's for recreational use or commercial use. You are meant to register it, and that is part of the regulations. Now, the registration itself, currently right now, the Civil Aviation has been very gracious. They aren't charging the registration fees which are prescribed in the actual regulations. Right now, they've put it out and just put a waiver. So they're having an open call to everyone to come and register their drones. But that is not to say that Zimra, on the other hand, won't come and ask you to pay duties if you haven't done so already, which is part of the registration process. So Civil Aviation won't make you pay, but Zimra might, just so that you know and are aware of that. But the process is there, and everyone, whether you have a toy, recreational drone, or a commercial drone, you must go and register your drone with Civil Aviation. Yeah.
Great. That's a very important piece of information, especially in the Zimbabwean context. If you acquire your drone, most probably from outside, you need to make sure that the duty is paid up and you register your drone so that you don't get into trouble in the future. So take note of that. And next question, Penelope Ngwenya is asking, so far someone who has never operated a drone but interested in using it in a specific sector, do I straight up go to the type of training, number 2, or I need the license training course first. I'll direct this one at Itumeleng. So I think the question is basically asking if you, let's say, for example, you're in the mining sector, do you proceed directly to get training for the mining sector, or you first have to get the RPL and general training? Take us on, Dumi.
I would actually recommend going into the RPL training initially, because then once you have that background and in terms of the regulations that are applied and the airspace and how you can actually go about using the drone for your specific type of sector, then you'll have a bit of a clearer idea also in terms of how the drone in itself operates. So with the sector specific training that are there on the board, they don't necessarily teach you how to fly the drone. So the assumption is that you already know how to fly a drone. So that's why I would recommend going to do the RPL training and then understanding how the regulations and the airspace and everything works, so that you can then apply that information into your sector specific training that you want to go into.
Great. I hope you answered Penelope. And Kimberly asks, can I use my IELTS as proof of English proficiency? Please, Dumi, can you take this one as well?
I'm actually not sure what IELTS is. Can I just get a clarification on that? Do you know, T?
I don't know if Penelope, if you can unmute and explain what IELTS is, but basically IELTS is an English proficiency exam. It's International English Language Test System.
Testing system. Yeah, I see it now. I would assume it would be valid, seeing as it's international. So I would assume that it is.
And Kimberly, oh sorry.
Yeah, so I would recommend also confirming with the specific school as well, as if they allow it, because from previous experience, what I've also noticed is one school may accept one form of certification and another one might not accept it. So I would also just follow up with the specific training school if the certification that I want to use, they will be able to submit it.
All right. We're going to take one more question, and then the other questions we're going to compile a document with the questions. This is because of our time. We need to wrap it up, but we're going to please continue posting your questions or email us, and we're going to compile a document with your questions, and then we're going to send them to you. But I'm going to just take one more question, and we then wrap it up. There's a question that I believe is very important. It says, how long does the RPL / RPAS course take on average?
Okay, so from a instructor perspective, what I've noticed is you might find guys who are able to complete the practical training within 2 to 3 days. If they have already been flying before. Some of them, maybe because of previous gaming experience or just the skill of it, they're able to complete the course shorter. But like I mentioned previously, so initially you'll have to do a week's course of theory, and then from there you'll do the practical training. So with the practical training, it can vary from about 1 week to maybe a month, 2 months. But like I said, the maximum that they actually give you is 3 months, because then once the 3 months comes, then your examination will essentially lapse, and then you'll need to go and rewrite the course again. So what the 2 to 3 weeks plus maybe in terms of actual flight flight training, and by that I mean, so once you've done all the theory courses and now you move on to the practical training, your actual hands-on operation of the drone, if you've never operated one before, that is generally about 3 to 5 hours, I can say, plus or minus, depending on how quickly you are able to grasp the skill. But remember, like I said, the 3 to 5 hours of actual practical training is split into, it can be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe sometimes 2 months, depending on how quickly you're actually able to grasp the concepts that they teach you. So with the training, each student is literally different, because some students may be able to complete it in like 3 weeks, where others may take 2.5 months, for example. And also
All right.
another factor to consider is that with the drones, you are only able to fly in specific weather conditions. So sometimes you may find that you have a training session, but the weather is not good. It's too windy or it's raining. And those are some of the things that also affect how quickly you are able to obtain your RPL.
All right. Thank you so much. That's very quite informative. I hope, Cleo, you are answered. With that said, I know all of us are asking, okay, we've spoken about drone training, we've spoken about the kinds of trainings that are there, and we're probably asking, so where do we go from here? Please, Tawanda, may you please inform us on, so how do we proceed now that we've got this information? What are the next steps for us who are in the Zimbabwean context? How do we keep the conversation going, and how do we keep the network growing? Please tell us more, Tawanda, concerning that.
Okay, thank you for that, Caspar, and thank you so much, Itumeleng. It's always good to have you just sharing with us, the standards required from an instructor's perspective. So in terms of the Zimbabwean context, right now, because there isn't a means to get an RPL, which is level 1, we have put ourselves forward to work on developing the level 2, level 3 training. Because we already know people are operating the drones, and part and parcel of what we are developing now is a basic drone competency course, which really looks at teaching the basics, borrowing from the RPL course and teaching the basics around how do you operate a drone safely, ethically, and responsibly within the confines of what's laid out in the training requirements in the law. In terms of the way forward, if you are, whether you're employed or wanting to operate drones from a commercial standpoint, one of the things that we're encouraging people to do is to reach out and connect with the Civil Aviation Authority and basically put some pressure on them to a large extent. They have really, are the ones who play a very key role in all of this that we're trying to do. And I think the more we have people requesting for training and talking about it and putting pressure on them, the more, it helps to move things forward so that we get to a place where we have at least a couple of drone training schools in the country. If you are in a position to invest in the RPL training, please do so with the knowledge that you will then still need to do the further training that we're talking about. You cannot go and get your RPL and then come back and think that you are now able to use it in whatever context, be it mining or security or agriculture or surveying, wherever you want to use, or apply technology in, you will need that additional training. So really what we're inviting people to do is to stay connected with us. Those who are interested in getting the RPL and are ready to do that, we can recommend good schools where you can do that immediately. Those who are looking to get some basic training going, we do have, like I said, our basic drone competency courses, which don't really cost too much. And we're really just looking at trying to make sure that there's safety in what you're doing, or at least there's some understanding in how you're conducting your current operations. Then I would also invite you to, like I said, connect with Civil Aviation and ask them, put pressure on them, and make sure that, you know, even when you want to carry out operations, the Civil Aviation has what's called an alternative means of compliance. And I'll repeat that, it's called an alternative means of compliance. So let's say you have a commercial operation that you want to conduct, be it in conservation or mining or whatever context. They have a means in which they will do a vetting process to allow you and give you a project by project permission to actually carry out operations, even if you do not have a license. And that's also where we are also encouraging to say, if you are able to at least get some sort of basic training, it allows you to have a better conversation when you go to Civil Aviation and say, this is the work that we want to do. But again, that's on a case-by-case basis. It's not an open kind of space, but you can approach them and say, this is what we need to do in this specific context. And they will direct you to carry out the required paperwork to allow you to then operate for that specific project, and not to say that you can just operate whenever and wherever. So stay connected with us. We'll have more of these sessions, I think, next month, and you can connect with us on email or through our social media platforms, and we can help and assist as much as we can. That's why we are here.